Alrighty, y'all. This is the first video, the first yap um, with the new setup. I do have the camera on top of the monitor in the middle of the table directly in front of me, so that's why I'm currently sitting where I am with the microphone in front of my face. New microphone should be a lot cleaner. And yeah, I'm gonna title this, I think, MVPod episode, whatever, or just call it MVPod. But I think the main thing that I wanted to talk about, and there is going to be some wind and background noise probably in the general vicinity of this thing, is kind of just the coaching vacancies that are currently going on in the NFL, and what I anticipate for the future of the Indianapolis Colts. As they are my favorite team, and they decided to keep everybody around, their head coach, their GM. I think the first talking point that I want to get to is I kind of want to just get straight into it. Ignore the decorations. They've been here since the previous owner of this house. Whenever I look to this angle, it's because I'm actually looking at my OBS to kind of see the view that y'all have, and yeah, those decorations are hilarious. I think the first thing I wanted to get into is just kind of recapping the Colts season and kind of reminding everybody mentally, I think, where we were going into the year and where we are now as Colts fans. I think in a lot of ways, the Colts season expectation was bleak because the year prior you had Anthony Richardson struggle. Joe Flacco had to start. I believe, last year was the year that Anthony Richardson had tapped out of a game. A lot of people, including myself, were very bullish, right? And if I use any vocabulary wrong in this, it's almost whatever time at night. Whatever. I think people forget, because of how good Daniel Jones played in the back half of the season, or not the back half, the first half of the season, that they're dismissing training camp, preseason, and everything that we kind of went through getting to the point where Daniel Jones was the starter. I viewed it, and everyone else in Colts media viewed it. Chris Ballard even explained it to be that Daniel Jones was signed and brought into Indianapolis to push Anthony Richardson to become QB1. When Daniel Jones won the job, I can't be the only person who is a fan of the Colts, who enjoys the Colts, who has been a fan of the Colts their whole life. I mean, this wall behind me will not be, blank forever. And at some point, there will be Colts something on that wall. I was very much so under the opinion that Daniel Jones winning the job meant that Anthony Richardson was at first a bust, probably gone soon, and 3, that this was a tank type of year. I thought this meant that this was a wash, a wipe your hands with it. They're going to win 3 games. They're going to get a top 5 pick. I don't know if y'all can hear that either. The wind is just obnoxious tonight. And not only is it obnoxious tonight, but it's brutal. Where the house lies is like kind of down a little bit. We get wind flow in this house, or at this property. I also will say 5 minutes into the video that I apologize if this webcam is like lagging behind or something, if the frames are pretty bad. It's my first time recording on this webcam. Wasn't a very expensive webcam. The microphone, I bought a microphone, an Elgato, and the webcam all in one fell swoop. And 2 out of the 3 have been great. The webcam, jury's still out. But no, so... coming out of preseason, I went into the year expecting and kind of almost wanting to bottom out, because I think if you're going to end up firing your coach and your GM, you want to do that from a place of poverty. You don't want to fire somebody unless you know you can get a good replacement. You don't necessarily want to fire somebody just in the middle of their tenure after like a good year, because I feel like a lot of the times that happens, if you don't make a slam dunk hire right after, you just look stupid. And Shane Steichen's a little bit too good to get beat like that. But I realize the error in my ways by wanting the tank year, right? Because in wanting the tank year, I kind of dismissed that the roster itself was not that bad. In the years of Shane Steichen as the head coach, Gardner Minshew, Anthony Richardson, Joe Flacco, Sam Ehlinger have been the guys that he's had to work with. And those are teams that are still winning 8-9 games and finishing on the border and on the cusp of a playoff berth. So we have to remember, it was not a team that was awful. It was a team that was on the cusp. And I think if I would have considered that a little bit more, I would have known that I was kind of shooting a little bit, well, maybe not too high, too low, I guess would be. We'll go down with it. We'll go that way with it. We'll go in a tunnel with it. I think it's possible that I shot too low in my expectation or in my prediction of it. And kind of set myself false expectations. Now, granted, hindsight's a million. We never knew that Daniel Jones would play as good as he did, nor did we ever expect that they would be an 8-2 team at one point in the year, 7-1 at one point in the year. But bye week came, Chiefs game came, the report comes out, fractured fibula. Riley Leonard has to play. Or no, it was Jacksonville game comes, Daniel Jones pops his Achilles, his season's over, at the moment it happens. Riley Leonard has to check in. Leonard checks in, he bangs his knee up, and it just trickled. Like, it was just a ball, and it started for me. Honestly, it kind of started for me whenever they take on an Atlanta team. Well, we can even rewind before that. Let's just keep backing it up, right? Let's just go through this season because I want to talk about it as a Colts fan, as a lifelong Colts fan. Marlon Jackson picking off Tom Brady in the AFC Championship game in 2006 is one of my, or 2006, 07 season, is one of my first football sports memories of my life. One of the first memories of my life. And then they went to the Bears against the Bears in the Super Bowl. I almost said they went to the Bears against the Super Bowl. That's how fired up I am that I'm saying that they went to the Bears. The Rams game. The Rams game was brutal. Adonai Mitchell, a second-round pick that I thought was first-round talent, who had fallen into the Colts' lap whenever they needed a true number one wide receiver to emerge on the roster. When you have Michael Pittman, who's a number two, when you have Alec Pierce, who's a deep threat number two, when you have Josh Downs, who's a true slot, you needed a number one to emerge. You get Adonai Mitchell, there's your four receivers, you're done with your receiving core. Didn't happen that way. And the Rams game ended his Colts tenure because he comes out in the Rams game, has a dropped fumble at the goal line on a 50-plus yard touchdown, and then later that same game has a holding penalty that people don't even talk about as much, has a holding penalty on a Jonathan Taylor touchdown run that takes that play away, wipes away 12 points, which would have been 14 because the kicker was pretty good this year. That at the time I think was good. They had like four kickers. I don't know why I said the kicker, like there was one. Shout out Blake Groupie. But he wipes away what would have been 14 points, and they would have won the game if neither of those plays went the way that they did. That's just, clear cut, clean, call it like we see it. That's what happened, right? Those four plays caused the result, or those two plays caused the result, those 14 points. Me, my fiance, some of her family, we went to the Titans game in person. which was after that, and I got to watch Adonai Mitchell basically only check in with the rotation off the bench. I remember people in the crowd even having the conversation. We were in the upper deck having the conversation about whether or not we think he'd get back into the lineup. We felt bad that he was benched because it had happened like 3 weeks, I think, before that game, or 2 weeks before. And Daniel Jones was hooping in that game. Downs, Warren, everybody. That's the other thing, too. The draft pick in Tyler Warren was very, very good. The offseason pickup of Travarius Ward, very, very good. Things were looking great at that exact moment. Get through the bye week. Like I said, the game that I think made me realize that there was cracks in the team was that the Atlanta Falcons are not that good. They go into Germany. They play the Atlanta Falcons. Daniel Jones has to grit one out by the skin of his nutsack to beat them. Chiefs game. Shane Steichen pretty much lost them that game on his own. The defense played very good considering the opposition. The offense played And in late game decision making, Shane Steichen, I contend that Shane Steichen gave that game away at times. So then we get to the Jags game, like I said. Pops his Achilles. Season's over. And I don't even know how to talk about the Phillip Rivers pickup because on one hand, it's cool. It's like a Disney movie. He's fucking a grandpa. He's not fucking a grandpa, but he is a fucking grandpa. He's 44, which might as well be a million in NFL years. He's been out of the league since 2020, where he last played for the Colts. The last time they made the playoffs, remind you. Like January of 2021 is the last time he had played a game, and it was the last time the Colts were in the playoffs. And we get to this point, right, where Phillip Rivers has been signed. He's on the practice squad. Sure. Do it. Be on the practice squad. Be the emergency quarterback. 2 days later, he's running the offense in practice. 3 days later, he's announced the starter. 4 days later, he's playing. So, that happens, right? That all plays out, whatever. He didn't play bad. They put up a 27 spot against San Fran's defense on Monday Night Football. Guess what? They also gave up 47, I think was the final score, 47 or something like that. Offense wasn't even that bad with Phillip because he knows the offense and he still has a decent feel for the game. It's just his arm was noodleish. I'm confident that I can, and I'm literally Joe Schmo. I'm not even going to wager that I could throw a faster ball than Phillip Rivers or a farther ball than Phillip Rivers. But I'm going to wager that I could throw a ball that reaches its target destination faster than Phillip Rivers after 50 throws. Because I don't think his elbow joints can hold it anymore. My long story short, brief synopsis on this season is this is the part, the long story short part is where I'll include the Sauce Gardner trade. Because admittedly, I didn't want to bring it up in the flow of the games because he didn't play. He played I don't know how many snaps for the Colts. He didn't really play. So we don't know that yet. We don't really know if we won the trade yet because he hasn't played enough to know if he's going to be at that all-pro level again. What we do know now is we are an 8-9 football team that missed the NFL playoffs, that doesn't have a solidified quarterback one going into week 1 of next season. The quarterbacks on the roster are a second-year player who's been banged up and hasn't really proven anything, and a fourth-year player, I believe now, who is a bust. The roster at large is a playoff roster, in my opinion, but it's not playoff depth, it's a playoff starting lineup. So if they get injured like they did this year, Buckner went down, Ward and Sauce went down, the offensive line got banged up, receiving core, I believe Michael Pittman missed a few games. If they don't stay healthy, right? But this is a team that does not have a solidified quarterback and now has no more first-round picks for these 2 seasons, this year and next year. And it's giving me indigestion. Can you hear this? no 2026 pick, no 2027 first round pick, and the 2024 second round pick, overall 52, has been traded with those two picks to get Sauce Gardner, who's only played so many snaps for us. And we haven't really figured out yet if that's going to work out or not. Now, Shane Steichen, Lou Anarumo, Jim Bob Cooter, coaching staff, they're staying, seemingly fully staying. Carly Gordon made it clear that Chris Ballard's staying. I'm not opposed to this, right? I'm not opposed to coming out of this 8-9 season, you keep everybody, which I didn't even, I'm all over the place. Brief synopsis, fool's gold is the word I'll use to be the long story short. I think the first half of the year was an easy schedule. In the first half of the year, teams hadn't figured out that Daniel Jones is really him yet. And I think we found out quickly that once they played tougher competition and got in some adversity, that the offense wasn't as great as they thought it was, and that Shane Steichen really wasn't that great of a decision maker late in games. Okay. Back to where I was in the future. Whenever I went to the future, I was supposed to be in the past, went to the future, now I got to come back to the past. I got to discuss what I was discussing before, finish that up, and now that I finished that up, I can talk about the future. I can talk about Carly agreeing to keep everybody around. Shane Steichen, I think, deserves to stay. The offense was that good. They were contending level offense in the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season. Defensively, Lou Anarumo was very solid at times. His secondary got ravaged. He lost his best pass rushing threat. They need help there. So Lou, he deserves to stay around. Jim Bob Cooter, does he really do anything besides just have a really fucking funny name? I don't know yet, but he's come from some good places that have some good offenses, and I mean he seemingly, he has some input, right? I think looking ahead to next year, my mentality as a Colts fan has always been, and it was like this last year, it's like this the year before that, and the year before that. I'm comparing the Colts to the Colts. I'm not comparing the Colts to the Colts of 10 years ago. I'm not comparing the Colts to the Colts of 5 years ago. I'm comparing the Colts to the Colts of last year. So when I watch the 2026, 2027 Colts, and whenever I watch the 2026 Colts offseason progress, I am seeing how will they improve upon the roster from the 2025, 2026 Indianapolis Colts, right? Easy. It's an easy enough explanation of how I view my favorite team. Because I know I'm going to rip my fucking hair out if I try to sit there and think about Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning every time I watch Riley Leonard or Phillip Rivers throw the ball. I can't do that to myself. I have to think about the now. I think I'll do this in like a 3-part explanation. And this is, mind you, none of this is scripted. This is all off the dome, just thoughts that I've collected that have stuck all day today. I think operationally, like I said, I'll start with the staff. I think operationally, I like that they kept everyone, but I do think they need to try to add, whether that's to the front office or to the actual coaching staff on the field, someone with more fire. I feel like Chris Ballard is so draft focused, and yes, he changed a little bit with bringing in Charvarius Ward, but bringing in Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum, that's aggressive, successful maneuvers. I think we need to see more of this. Meanwhile, with the draft strategy, they adjusted it a little bit. The last 2 years, they've tried to go for guys that are actually just good at football, but only in the first round. And I'm one of these people. Me as a sports analyst, I am not going to give you a ton of credit for making the obvious choice. I will give you a thumbs up if I find out that you didn't overthink it and make some dumbass decision. But drafting Laiatu Latu as the first defensive player in that class, whenever he was the best defensive player in that class, pretty easy pick. Drafting Tyler Warren, when literally every mock draft that ever existed, if Tyler Warren fell to the Colts in their mock draft, he was picked. And they didn't even discuss it hardly. They just kind of, there it is, Tyler Warren. that's not going to get a ton of credit from me. But he didn't overthink it. He made 2 really good picks. Now, some of the late round picks in these last couple of drafts, still Chris Ballard falling into the Chris Ballardism, which is you look at the RAS, the Real Athletic Score, and you say, okay, well, they're an elite athlete. They have size for the position. That's our pick. Which I don't hate it, but I don't love it. It's a very schematic coaching staff that doesn't necessarily have elite player development skills. They have player scheming skills. They have the ability to go on the field and run a playbook that's effective, but to get guys up to speed at a high level isn't really their thing. So to draft guys who look and feel like they've never really played football at a high level before. And I'm not talking about anybody in specific, but there are legitimately guys on the team that got drafted because they were athletes and never really made football plays before they were picked. I think the draft strategy has to be adjusted a little bit. The team needs guys that were seniors in college. The team needs guys that played 5 years. The team needs guys that have the stats to back it up. The team needs people who played special teams, who tight ends that block. Like that's why I love Tyler Warren. They need pass rushers that run defend. They need these things to happen. They need 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round picks to come in and be starters if they want to progress. Because once again, no first-round picks this year or next year. Ballard historically has been pretty solid at hitting on 2nd and 3rd rounders, but he's also been pretty notorious for swinging on an athlete and that athlete just not really knowing how to play the sport. We get it. You're 6'3", you're 290, and you can run a 4.5. Do you know how to hit an effective swim move? I think for the staff, I'm fine with them keeping everybody because you can't really – who are you going to hire in this particular offseason? Coaching is different because I think with the coaching you could potentially upgrade from Steichen, but I think the transitional period from Shane Steichen's offense to a Stefanski or to a Harbaugh with whoever he would have brought in or to a – let's say you go to the Rams system and you go to their tree and you sign Chris Shula. The transition – away from Shane Steichen to one of those guys would be so much that you wouldn't really have a great year, I feel like. Meanwhile, with Ballard, who are you going to hire as a GM to come into a team that isn't going to be working with a gazillion dollars of cap space, doesn't have a quarterback, and doesn't really have an effective way to get a new quarterback? You're not going to hire a good GM in that landscape. So what you're doing is Chris Ballard's shit in the bed, and you're just making him sleep in it. He pissed his britches, and you're forcing him to wear it till we get home to change him. We're not going to stop our plans. We're not going to leave. We're not going to stop shopping. Just fucking stuff some toilet paper down there and, make it home. It's going to be a little warm. It's going to be a little damp. Sorry about you. Take a shower whenever we get home. That was I had an itch. That was not a nose pick, I promise. I think so that was staff. In terms of player personnel wise, or roster construction, I guess is how I'll put it. And I'm going to split this. This is where it's 3 parts because I'm going to split. Quarterback is different, right? Let me start with quarterback because quarterback's probably the hotter topic, and quarterback's also the one that's going to be a little bit quicker. I think the path forward next year is starting Anthony Richardson. I know he was bad whenever we last played him. I still don't love his fit in that style of offense, but I think you should go into next year with Daniel Jones under contract, and Anthony Richardson should be the week 1 starter. DJ's probably not going to be healthy for week 1. And if he is, I'm going to be skeptical if he's actually healthy. Start Anthony Richardson. Press forward with Anthony Richardson as your quarterback. If he sucks, he sucks. Oh well. If he does great, you can just let Daniel Jones be the backup. If Anthony Richardson sucks, Daniel Jones can come in and start, whenever he's healthy. All he need, like, let's say Daniel Jones' timeline, and I don't know what his actual timeline is going to be, but let's say his timeline positions him to play in week 6. All Anthony Richardson really has to do, especially with the on-paper schedule that the Colts currently have, is win like 3 games. And they were a 500 team when Anthony Richardson was last the starter. Let's not forget it. Like, AR was still winning them football games. Shane Steichen's that good of a coach. I think you can win 2 or 3 games in a 4 or 5 week, or in like a 5 or 6 week period with the schedule they're expected to have next year, and position DJ to come in and make a playoff run. I'm fully of that opinion. So I think quarterback is straightforward. You move forward with DJ, Riley, and AR as your quarterback room. If you get the opportunity to add somebody in the draft, do it. Trinidad Chambliss is someone, I just got done watching him against Miami, that I think if he were to come into the NFL draft would still probably be a 2nd or 3rd round pick because his sample size is very small. I think he is a legit NFL quarterback. I'm not saying he should be picked over Mendoza or Dante Moore, but I think he should be QB3 in the draft class if he were to come out this year. And I think if I was Trinidad Chambliss, I would consider going out, because it's either that or you go to LSU and transfer and risk injury, get another year older. But I am, as a Colts fan, interested in the idea of maybe you let Daniel Jones walk because of the injury and because of some of the poor play leading up to the injury, which has to be somewhat acknowledged. And then I think, in that 4th or 5th round, you draft a Garrett Nussmeier or a Drew Aller or a John Mateer or one of these guys that was expected to be in the 1st to 2nd round range that fell throughout the process of the draft. I'm intrigued by that option, but I don't think it's feasible. And then the pro market, Kyler Murray, Mac Jones, these are guys you have to trade for. I don't love trading for them. If you're going to bring in another pro, sign one. Do not trade for one, because I think the draft assets you're already limited to now with the situation at hand. Do you really want to limit yourself even more by trading another pick just to get a QB? Unless you can figure out a way to convince a team that you can swap Anthony Richardson for their quarterback and just go into next season with that mentality. Maybe you can just get a guy that's like a stopgap bridge player until Daniel Jones is healthy, and then you just ride Daniel Jones out one more year. I don't know. But quarterback, I would stick with what they have. And then the player personnel, there is a serious need on this team that I think hasn't been addressed well at all by Chris Ballard. I think it's actually been Chris Ballard's biggest difficulty, and that's the D-line, specifically the edge rush room. I think the Chris Ballard move, because one of his first moves as the GM was to trade the 1st-round pick for DeForest Buckner. That was great. Buckner's not the same guy that he traded for. He's older now. He's injured a decent amount now, and he's going to regress. And he has. Buckner, as your number one pass rusher, can't really win the way that it used to, so they've had to bring in guys like Laiatu Latu in the 1st round, who I think is coming along, but not maybe as fast as you wanted him to. You draft JTT last year, JT Tuimoloau. You pick up guys like Kwity Paye. Samson Ebukam was an offseason acquisition they made. Tyquan Lewis is a pickup they've made. It's a lot of number 2s and number 3s to me. The D-tackle duo, Buckner and Stewart, are both aging out. Guys like Tyquan Lewis and Samson Ebukam, and I believe Grover. Some of these guys are on contract years now, and they're probably leaving. I think they're positioning themselves poorly on the D-line, and I think that's what's going to hurt, because Lou Anarumo came from a team that did have Trey Hendrickson when Trey Hendrickson was at his best. Lou Anarumo was his defensive play caller. I like the secondary a lot. They're going into next season defensively with Charvarius Ward, Kenny Moore, Sauce Gardner, Cam Bynum, Nick Cross. Rodney Thomas is kind of the rotational safety. Jonathan Edwards is still in the room at corner. I think Jalen Jones is still around whenever he gets healthy. I think it's Jalen Jones. But actually, did Jalen Jones move on to another team? I can't remember. So many players move and get hurt and this and that. I know the starters, the big ones, right? Whenever they're healthy, I know the big ones. I look at the defense, though, and I say, okay, that secondary is awesome. They can run zone. They can run man really well. Man really well. I think one more safety wouldn't hurt. I like Nick Cross. I think you definitely re-sign Nick Cross, but I think Cam Bynum and Nick Cross together is good, not great. I think you need one more guy, potentially a guy that can play nickelback in case Kenny Moore's cut or moved on from because of his contract, which could happen. And then I like the prospects of going out and getting another corner because Charvarius Ward's retirement is impending at this point. And if you're already considering cutting Kenny Moore, you might have accidentally ended up picking up Sauce Gardner and making him the only valuable corner on the roster. But I say all that to say the secondary is great, but the front seven on paper, especially going into next year with the contracts that are coming up, just does not look great. You had Jermaine Pratt and Zaire Franklin were running linebacker last year. Shagun Alubi's a linebacker, and I love Shagun Alubi, but I love him because of his special teams, not because of his linebacker play. Pratt and Zaire is not going to cut it. They're both good run defenders, but neither of them can cover anything, so their pass coverage at linebacker has been atrocious for a long time. Like I said, the D-line is going to get painfully thin, and they're already not that great. I think it was Neville Gallimore was the other player that's on a contract here that I heard. You just position yourself really poorly right now. And I think for the Colts to succeed next season, because you want to win, not just because you're a football team with aspirations and goals and dreams, but also because you don't have a pick to play for. So if you're going to suck, why? If you're going to suck, you're just going to suck for no reason. You're not even going to get a pick out of it. You're just going to suck for the suck of it. You're just going to suck for the suck of it. Go out and win games and make the playoffs and build a winning culture. Save your jobs also. I think the Colts defense, in particular edge rusher for me, because I think if you move on from guys like Paye and Sampson and Tyquan Lewis, you bring in guys that can run defend. You bring in a true run defender. You bring in a true number one if you can. I think they need to be in the trade market for any big name. Because Latu and Tui Maloau is not going to cut it next year if they're the two starters. I fear. Because I think JTT is a number 3 and I think Latu's a number 2. They need a number 1. Or they need another number 2 and just a prey. And then in terms of the offense, roster construction, the offense, they've done a really good job of drafting and replacing offensive linemen so far, so I'm not upset if Braden Smith were to walk, because I think they've done a good job to set up guys like Jalen Travis and Blake Freeland to potentially come in and start and maybe develop well. But, really, to be honest with you, there's nothing to say about the offense that wasn't already said with quarterback, except for pay Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce had 1,000 yards on 49 catches, I think it was. He is the best deep threat. Not best deep threat in the league. Best deep threat who is only a deep threat in the league. He's the best I only catch deep balls in the league, right? Because there's guys like Jamar Chase is a better deep threat, but he's not only a deep threat. They slant, fucking screen, fucking, deep dig, whatever. Go balls, post routes, deep corner route. Give me Alec Pierce every time at this point. I think my prediction for next season is that this team will be fighting for the 7 seed again. I don't think they'll be fighting for the division because I do think the Texans and the Jags are both way too good. And I think my personal goal for the Colts next season would be to just try to win 9 or 10 games and sneak into the wild card, because you're not going to try to suck and tank. I think the Colts off-season goal needs to be add depth and get healthy. Those need to be the two goals. Add depth and get healthy. Because you need the starters to be healthy, and you need to be prepared for them to be hurt, because they at times last season they acted like they were not prepared to be hurt. I think my third goal for the Colts is I want to see Carly Gordon matter more. And what I mean by that, and that's a whole other can of worms, but basically what I mean by that is I feel like she needs to prove to me that she is really putting her foot down. And I think what that means to me is that if the Indianapolis Colts finish with anything less than a winning record next season, she will fire everyone. That's that. Straight up. To touch a little bit on the other coaching vacancies, not other coaching vacancies like the Colts are one of them, but because it was Tennessee, and this is all off top of the dome. I'm not really going to try to look this up, but it was Tennessee, it was Atlanta, the Raiders are a big one. Everybody's interested in the Cleveland situation. The Dolphins just came open today. The big one, the kind of the shocker, if you will, has been the Dolphins, because I think Mike McDaniel's job felt safe once we got a couple days through and everybody else had already fired their guy. But the Ravens is probably the biggest one, because going into the year we did not expect the Ravens to miss the playoffs. I mean, Lamar was banged up, of course, but the Ravens missed the playoff, and John Harbaugh gets fired, and I think John Harbaugh deserved to get fired, admittedly. I don't think what was happening there was going to work. I think it was stale. I think his ability to replace coordinators that had been hired elsewhere on the defensive side of the ball, like Zach Orr, was just not it this year. And to have some of the guys that he's had over the last 5 years and then move on to Zach Orr was definitely a downgrade. I'm a fan of the Ravens' job for a lot of these guys. I'm a fan of the Raiders' job for a lot of these guys. And I'm not going to sit here and try to predict who I think is going to go where and this and that, but I think the one thing that everyone online and everybody kind of in the media can kind of agree on is that John Harbaugh to the Giants feels like the right fit right now. I think early on, some weird but fun fits that I like. I think Kevin Stefanski would be super fun in Vegas. Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers, Fernando Mendoza is your first overall pick quarterback. Just Kevin Stefanski's offense. Maybe he can bring Jim Schwartz's defense with him. I love the idea of all this. John Spytek is a good GM as well, so I know that if he hires whoever John Spytek hires will be in good process, I do believe. I think Harbaugh to the Giants is probably one of my favorite fits, just because I think what the culture is that he can potentially bring is a good fit, but also if he were to bring Todd Monken with him as his offensive coordinator, I think Jackson Dart could potentially flourish in that style of offense, and I think that'd be great for his development and their future. And then, I'm a big believer in this Titans job. Not because I think it's a good job necessarily. I think the Titans job is actually pretty damn bad for like a first-time head coach. But with some of the experienced head coaches that are out there, I'm not going to ever predict that a Mike McDaniel or a Kevin Stefanski or a John Harbaugh or a Raheem Morris or a Pete Carroll would ever be the hire in Tennessee. But like them interviewing Jason Garrett makes sense to me. I don't like Jason Garrett that much as a coach, but them looking at Jason Garrett, right? It screams to me that Tennessee wants an experienced head coach, and I want to point out there is a path here, and I'm not gonna toot my own horn or anything. I might toot, and it might sound like a horn, but I'm not gonna toot my own horn. When the Jets hired and there's a comment, shout out NFL Stock Exchange, Trevor and Connor, and the cook. I commented when they did their Fix Their Franchise episode on the Jets that I thought Aaron Glenn, coming from the Lions and bringing Tanner Eggstrand with him to be his OC, is the combo that would get hired in the near future. Now, granted, the Jets just stunk. The offense wasn't necessarily the reason they stunk. They actually had some good offensive games. I think Tanner was actually pretty damn decent at times. But that was a combo that got hired, so I think I'm good at predicting these combos. Josh McCown has had head coaching interviews. The only reason why I think Josh McCown hasn't been hired as a head coach is because he hasn't really called plays before. He's just been a quarterback's coach. I think we need to see Josh McCown call plays, and if he calls plays well for 1 or 2 years, he'll be a head coach. I want to see the combination of Brian Flores and Josh McCown in Tennessee next season. I think that is the path forward for them because Josh McCown working directly with Cam Ward, comboed with Brian Flores taking one of the worst defenses in the league, and immediately, even with that roster, you still have Jeffrey Simmons. Cedric Gray is a good young linebacker. The corner room is pretty ass. The edge rush room is pretty ass, but you can still get from bottom 5 to top 20 just off of the B-flow hire, and then you add some talent this offseason, maybe use your first-round pick on the best defensive player available, and you go from there. That's going to be like my prediction, my stamp it. If it happens, I'm happy. Because I do, and this is my thing, I think B-flow gets a job this offseason. I think there's a couple teams that are in this race that are that aggressive to take on the man who is suing the NFL. I specifically think the Ravens. The Ravens are going to go for an experienced guy. There's no reason they shouldn't. People are saying Jesse Minter is obvious. I don't know how obvious he is because, like I said, I think they'll go for an experienced guy. Because I think a first-time head coach there, whenever you're trying to make Lamar a champion, trying to figure this whole thing out, you're giving a first-year head coach a roster that wants to win now. I don't love that idea. I think sometimes with first-year head coaches, you want to have as low of expectations as possible, with the idea that you will win games in 3 years as opposed to right now. That's why, like in Tennessee, for example, Brian Callahan comes in. Yeah, it wasn't good. He only had 2 years to do it, though. It was never going to get better. They made the right move by firing him, but it's an example. And I think, the Falcons' job, I sit here and I think about the Falcons' job, and I think, man, with the offensive coordinators around the league that are so fun, I want to see Clint Kubiak on that team, I think. Now, Clint Kubiak's one of the best ones because Clint Kubiak is gonna probably leave Seattle and go get a head coaching job as one of the best schematic minds in the league this season. And I don't know. I don't love the fit of Michael Penix with Kubiak, but I love the fit of Kirk and Bijan and Drake London. And if you can add another wide receiver, and if you can bring back Kyle Pitts maybe, and the offensive line's already decent, and if you can, bring in some more defensive talent, specifically in the linebacker and secondary rooms, and on the defensive tackle position, which they've spent a lot of draft capital on these spots, but still, this is a team that's not that far off of winning that division because nobody ever is because that division stinks. Not going to rule out that you could bring in a guy like Clint Kubiak and Cook and play really good football. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else to ramble about. The NFL playoffs are coming up. I'm going to upload this tomorrow, technically today, but I'm going to upload this tomorrow. It'll be Friday. First playoff game is Saturday, I think. Yeah, Saturday is like one game, I think. 2 games. 3 games on Sunday, 1 game on Monday. My biggest, I guess, to give one prediction, I could predict them all, but I think the game that I think is the most obvious to me is the Texans beating the Steelers. I don't think Aaron Rodgers and that offense are nearly good enough to handle the defense of the Texans. I think the Texans could put up 17 and win the game comfortably. And my pick'em, the game that I'm least confident in of the entire weekend, is kind of a tie. Cop-out answer, I know. Philly versus San Fran, and Jags versus Bills, which admittedly I can and do see a path where those two games, the winners of those two games, are in the Super Bowl. That's why it's such a pick 'em to me. I think the Patriots get it done. I think I really like what was the other matchup that I was thinking of that I forgot? I think the team in the entire playoffs that I find to be the most fraudulent is the Broncos. I actually don't think they're a number 1 seed type of team. I don't think the Patriots are a number 2 either, though, and I don't think the Eagles are a number 3. I think it's a very fraudulent playoffs, but I think it's one of those things where maybe we're overthinking it a little bit, and the best teams are just the best teams sometimes. But yeah, for my biggest, that was the Rams-Panthers was the other one where it's like, I think there's no way the Rams lose that, and if they do, Bryce Young is franchise best player ever. No, that's pretty much, I think I established my dominance in the room. The balls of glory in the corner. Next time you see this room, it probably will be decorated slightly. I'm not going to turn the camera at all, but you can see the cardboard box right back there. Yeah, there's a lot of boxes and random stuff in this room at the moment, so it hasn't really been developed just yet, but it will be. And when it does, obviously more content. Like I said, I have an Elgato now, so gaming content can finally come out. I do have, obviously, this is a sports talk type of channel, but I play a lot of sports video games, so I'm not going to rule that out. Smitty the King 00 on Twitch. I will stream on Twitch. I have streamed on Twitch. Not a word. Not sure what the form of that word I'm going for there is, but grammatically was not my strong suit. Yeah, I think if you made it this far, almost 50 minutes of recording in this room with a microphone in front of my face, being held by my hands, my grubby little hands, holding it like this. If there's any... Oh, the lighting went down again. There we go. It's like, if you can hear my PlayStation controller, it's just my monitor. If there's any suggestions for topics, if there's any comments and concerns based on what I talked about today, and if you guys have any video ideas or suggestions, please let me know. Doesn't mean I'm going to do them. Don't get upset if I don't, but I probably will, because what else am I going to do? We bought a house. You have a room that you can record in. Do it, right? Why not? I think I will title this an MVPod. Obviously, if you're already watching, you know what it's called. I don't know what it's called yet, but thank you for watching the most valuable podcast, the MVPod, and the award goes to... What type of outro is that, dude? Run the balls.